Hello everyone, this is Mike from Dimensional Walking. Today we're going to talk about a subject that is dear to everyone's heart in the world of alien abduction. It's called missing time. Okay? Uh, so, what is missing time? Basically, is a term that refers to some people's connection to close encounters with UFOs and aliens. And it's kind of the gaps in the conscious memory relating to a specific time from either several minutes to several days of time, which seems to be lost. Uh, and these lost time frames usually are only recovered, or at least you get a glimpse of what went on through hypnosis or through deep dreams. So those are the two ways you can go back and actually see what possibly happened and for you to understand what possibly happened. So there's also this time flux, as I call it, is when you go inside a UFO. Now this is kind of I guess I want to say understood if you understand a little bit of Einstein's theory. It's called time dilution theory. Uh, and what that basically is, because of the different propulsion systems that it seems like the aliens have, they actually create time inside or around that propulsion system. So when you go inside of a UFO, you would be in this new time frame. So what happens is when you do that, most of the time you'll go in there and you think that you're in there for, it seems like, days, absolute days. But when you come back out, you find out that it's only been for a very short time, matter of actually minutes, maybe hours at the most, but not days and not, hours. And I've talked to people, abductees, many of them that say that they've gone into UFOs have the same strange feeling. They go in, they think they've been gone a long time. They're afraid when they get out, nobody's going to know they even existed or what happened to them. They think the police and everybody's going to be, going crazy and trying to find them. Uh, I've also heard a couple of the opposite way, where people would go in there thinking they're only in there for a couple, for a very short time, and then they actually are missing for longer periods. But most of the time, it's the other way. Most of the time, it's where you go in and you think you've been in there for a very long time, but when you come out, you've only been in there for a reasonably short time. So, anyways, that's that. So, but Bud Hopkins, as probably most of you know, wrote some pretty amazing stuff about missing time and missing time experiences. Because in the people that he talked to, almost all of them had missing time of some sort, at least what they can remember. Um, besides, and Bud says, besides the UFO Einstein theory of time dilution, he felt that just the trauma of being abducted and going through that trauma just completely throws your whole time frame off. And also, he thought the ability of the aliens to control the human mind was pretty profound, and that created this missing time. So I think there's enough reasons why this probably does happen, and it is a real phenomenon. So, anyways, let me tell you about a couple missing time experiences. One about myself, and the other two by a good friend of mine and a coworker. I had a friend named Barry that worked with me in Atlanta, Georgia, for several years. Got to know him. He was an abductee. He had all kinds of really interesting experiences, and we'll talk about a couple more of his experiences in a future, relatively soon video I'm going to do on a couple other ones of him. But anyways, this particular one was pretty interesting. Actually, there's two of them. The first one was a driving experience that he had was going to see a relative in Memphis, Tennessee, and he was coming down from Nashville, Tennessee. And he said it would be, and I didn't check this out, but he said normal time from Nashville to Memphis was about 3.5 hours. That seems reasonable. I didn't look at a map and I didn't calculate it out, but 3.5 hours seems reasonable in the distance wise. I guess if you went 90 miles an hour, it could be a couple hours, but I think 3.5 hours is reasonable. But anyways, this particular time, he doesn't know why, how, but he ended up after 5 hours, all of a sudden coming sort of to consciousness and realized he was 40 miles west of Knoxville. So that is bizarre because that makes no sense at all. And he just couldn't believe it when it happened. He was completely confused, he's disoriented. It took him a while just to even figure out where the heck he was. And he believes with that. After a while, years later, he said that he came back to me and said, you know what, I was just dreaming, and this whole incident came back up again, and he felt that he was just taken, his whole car and everything was just taken up in a ship, etc. And they let him back down kind of in the wrong place. Normally they try to bring you back at least going in the right direction. Then they picked you up at, because there's been other people I've known that get picked up in a car, and people see the car actually going up in the air, but they're usually brought back at some other time and put back going in the same direction. So anyways, he was, they just put him somewhere completely different. But the interesting thing about that is that they seem to have a habit of that, because he told me about some other missing time he had, which was involved him in his house. And he said it seemed to happen when he would come home from work. And of course, he came home, whatever the time was, say 4:30, 5 o'clock every day. So it was a constant thing, 5 days a week at least, right? So he would come back home and he would kind of chill out, rest, kick off his shoes, and he would go and sit in his living room and maybe turn television on or whatever, have a beverage. He didn't drink. So he said usually is either coffee or tea or water, but he would just sit. That was kind of his routine he would do. And he said many times he would end up completely gone. I mean, he just doesn't remember what happened. And he would be brought back, he said, and put sometimes not in the same chair, not in the same place, but some completely different chair. Okay, it'd be over in the left side of the room, the right side of the room. He said a couple times it was completely in a different room. And he said this happened over and over again. Enough that he started, doing more detail. He actually would go ahead and set a little alarm, and every 10 minutes he would kind of jar himself out of some kind of a strange state, and he would start writing down the time and how long he thought he was out, which usually wasn't correct at all, and then he'd go back into the state. So his conclusion was obviously that he was abducted and taken somewheres. Even after he did all this logging of the time and everything, it still seemed to come out that way for him. And that was his feelings. And I think he was. The other thing he always said, Jesus, I'm really happy I still end up back in my house, because he was always concerned that he was going to end up in somebody else's house, because they had a tendency not to always get his stuff back right, especially after he had that experience on the expressway in Tennessee. So anyways, he was always grateful for that, because just think about it. What if they ended up putting him back in his neighbor's house or in another part of the country or somewhere else, and all of a sudden he's there and somebody just completely freaks out on him. So he was always grateful to them, but of course he was very, very confused and very upset that it even happened at all. But this was sort of his life. He had a lot of really interesting experiences, and we'll talk about a couple more, like I said, in the near future. So next, I had my own missing time experiences. At least this is one I actually know about or remember, and it was quite, I call it, shocking and confusing at the same time. I would run around. I would run around a park um, when I lived in Albuquerque, and I've done this 100 times. This particular park, I'd run. I'd had a pedometer, a pedometer, or whatever you call them, on my wrist. And what I would do is I go around until I got about 10,000 steps, and that typically took me a certain amount of time. I'm going to guess it probably took me an hour, close to an hour, I believe. I think it doesn't really make any difference at this minute how long it took, because I'm just going to tell you, one time I was there and suddenly it took me 3 times that time. 3 times. So if it took an hour, it ended up taking like about 3 or 4 hours for me to get to 10,000 steps. And it was crazy. This particular time, my wife at the time, she was freaking out. She actually drove over to the park and started looking for me after just about at the end, just before I got to the 10,000 steps, and said, "Hey, want to know what was going on, because I was gone much longer than I should have been." And I'll tell you, I swore I just did everything I did the exact same I had done 100 other times. And this time it took 3 times as long. So, my feelings there, I was taken, and, they brought me back, and I just kept on rolling until the little buzzer, the little timer that I had, that once it hit 10,000 steps, it went off, and it went off. But it only went off once. It only goes off once because it stops. It just lets you know you got your 10,000 steps, and it stops. It doesn't repeat itself. When you get to the next 10,000 steps, you have to reset it. So that was the thing that I knew. I wasn't, hadn't lost my mind or anything, but it was very shocking and very concerning and very confusing. And till this day, I never forgot that experience. That was really, really crazy. So I guess one of the things to say is pay attention to your surroundings, pay attention to detail, uh, and you're probably not losing your mind. In fact, I know you're not. But you could have been taken for a strange journey to another world. There's no doubt about it. And it probably happens every day to thousands of people around the earth. I have no doubt about it. And it isn't just like when you're in bed and you get abducted and they bring you back to bed. A lot of that does happen that way. But I'm going to tell you right now, it can happen in your car. It can happen walking down the street. It can happen walking in the woods. It can happen almost anywhere. Most of the time, they try to bring you back to the same correct place, but it doesn't always happen that way. Okay? So, anyways, with that said, if you'd like to share your missing time experiences, please do. You can either share them with a comment, or you can send it to us at a private email at our dimensional walking at gmail.com. And please like us if you like us. And we need your subscriptions. And all that said, thanks a lot. Bye-bye.